you talk about the composition of what this bullpen might look like in a playoff situation. And it sort of draws into a larger conversation about what we've seen from Christopher Sanchez lately, what we've seen from Jesus Luzardo. He's starting to be a little bit more consistent. And then certainly what we've seen from Ranger Suarez, especially his last 2 times out. There was the assumption that Wheeler's at the top. You have the surplus. Alvarado comes back. You lose him for the playoffs, but you'll be able to slot in Suarez or Luzardo in his place. And then you go into a situation in the postseason where you're carrying Banks and Strom, and then one of your left-handed, surpluses going into a playoff series. Obviously, now that's not the case with Zach Wheeler being out for the season, which we had suspected when we first saw that news. It creates an interesting dynamic because do you have the luxury now of taking either Luzardo or Suarez and slotting them into that bullpen? Or do you say, who are my 3 best guys? And if they're all left-handed, can you go into a playoff series and go Sanchez, Luzardo, Suarez back to back to back against an opponent? To me right now in this moment, other than this Mets series, which is filled with intrigue and there's going to be plenty to talk about there, I'm very curious to see how the Phillies would go into a potential playoff series and line up this pitching staff.
Yeah, and it's all going to be hinged upon one thing and one thing only. How does Aaron Nola look the rest of September, or the rest of the year, rest of the last month of the season? Like that's the big story, right? I mean, he had an encouraging start on Saturday. I thought he was really good for 5 innings, started the tire in the 6th, gave up 2 solo homers, but on the end, all told, 6 innings, 2 earned runs, 5 hits. It was a good start for Aaron.
Why did the Phillies not give a pitcher who is looking to find his footing a more optimal or favorable defensive alignment behind him?
I think that they're looking at the offensive matchups every game, and I think that I think. Well, I think that the idea is when you lose Wheeler, right? You no longer have the margin for error that you can lean on and say, well, if our lineup's not hitting, the pitching will save us.
Yeah.
Until the offense figures it out. You no longer have that. So at this point, the offense has to improve. And so basically what you're doing is every game you're looking for your best offensive matchups, even if it gives you a slight downgrade defensively. I think that that's what they're going to do. But back to Nola, like that is what dictates, I think, the playoffs and how you set it up.
And how encouraged were you by Aaron Nola on Saturday night watching the broadcast? I mean, and I don't mean this to be, I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything, but like watching the broadcast, like listening to Tom McCarthy, listening to that booth, you'd think that Aaron Nola would look like Cy Young on Saturday night. Like it was so much more encouraging than what we had seen on Sunday. He had worked out of some trouble in the middle innings there. And you're like, wow, this has turned into a really good start. And then, of course, the 2 home runs, and you're like, all right, well, there you go.
Yeah, well, I think, again, it was the first time that he's, got back above 80 pitches in a major league game in more than 3 months, right? I mean, so, you start, and the velocity started to dip in the 6th inning just a little bit. But when he was early in the first 5 innings, he was sitting 93 on that fastball. And I talked to him about it afterwards, and he said, that really helps the curveball, and changeup secondarily. But like he threw more curveballs, higher percentage of curveballs in that game than any start in his career. He threw 44% of his pitches were curveballs in that game. But he felt like he was able to keep batters off balance because his fastball was 93. If that fastball's 90, it's easier to it doesn't help those secondary pitches, right? So I felt like early in the game and for 5 innings, he had that 93 and was able to get it, and that's good. And so if he's able to go 93 and he's locating well, he's going to be the Aaron Nola that you need him to be. If he's not 93 and not locating, he's going to get torched, which we've seen that too, right? One start, it was encouraging. It has to continue through the next month. If it does, he's going to start in the playoffs. And it makes it easier for you to move one of those lefties to the bullpen.
And is it because you owe it to Aaron Nola? Is it because of the experience and pedigree and stature that you do it? Is it because you do need to deviate from 3 left-handed starting pitchers in a row? Or is it about taking one of those lefties and really fortifying the bullpen? And to what end does the matchup matter? Because then that's what I start to look at. One of the exercises I did before we started recording today was, where are the probable or potential National League postseason teams at in terms of OPS against lefties and righties? And there are a couple teams that the disparity is pretty significant. The Dodgers, for on the other end of that, are pretty consistent. 763 against lefties, 771 against right-handers, and that's near the top of baseball against both. The Brewers are much better against lefties, 763 versus 734 than they are against right-handers. Cubs, fairly consistent, 737 lefties, 751 righties. But the two that are really interesting are the Mets and the Reds. So the Mets, 692 OPS against left-handed pitching, 768 against right-handed. I mean, that's a sizable difference. And the Reds, 644 against lefties, 731 against righties. Again, much better against righties, both the Mets and Reds. So I rattle off all these numbers and I start to think about it. I say the Phillies and Mets get each other, specifically the Mets, in a postseason series. If you know the Mets are terrible against left-handed pitching, and they are well above average against right-handed pitching, and the Mets have seen Aaron Nola a million times, and I feel like I've seen this Aaron Nola start against the Mets before where it looks exactly like it did last postseason, do I say, hey, Aaron, you're part of the mix, but we'd like to avoid you in a potential Mets matchup? Like, do you look at it and think there's anything to that? Do you think that there's anything to maybe saying, like, who is our opponent? Let's try to attack them this way.
Well, I do, but I also think that it's a situation where you look at, if you're playing the Mets, let's play this out for a second. So you assume that the Phillies are getting the bye and the Mets are upsetting somebody and they're playing in the 5-game series, or are you talking about Phillies Mets wild card? Because I think it's two different scenarios.
Let's, for the purposes of this, let's work through both, because I think both are very possible. I mean, I think both these scenarios are on the table.
Okay, so let's go with the presumption that the Phillies get a bye. They're right now 2.5 games up on both the Dodgers and Padres for that second seed, and by the way, within 4.5 of the Brewers for the number 1 seed. So yes, it's still within reach. So let's go under that presumption with the day off. Extra day off in that NLDS, and even though it's a 5-game series, you only need 3 starters, right? You can start your game 1, game 2 starter twice each in that series. So in a sense, you can get 4 of the 5 games with left-handed starters and still start Aaron Nola and still have the extra lefty in the bullpen. So it still works, right? In that scenario. So you can sit there and go, we'll have this matchup advantage. If it goes 5 games, we have 4 of them with left-handed starters, and we still have a guy who we could bring into that Aaron Nola start in Jesus Luzardo. If Nola's not going well, we could get him out quick and bring in Luzardo, and he could have that length and be able to kind of piggyback off that. So the whole thing really works if it's a 5-game series. If it's a 3-game series, I think it's a different conversation. If it's a 3-game series, maybe you look at it and go, we're announcing our game 1 and 2 starter, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, and then we'll see where we're at in game 3.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a different conversation at that point.
What's so interesting about this, again, this all assumes health, and it sort of assumes that they are where they're at right now. Like, I'm looking at a Ranger Suarez who over his last 2 starts has gone 13 2/3 innings, allowed 7 hits, 2 earned runs, 21 strikeouts to no walks. So now, where we were starting to look at the declining velocity of Ranger Suarez and the declining production where he's getting knocked around a little bit and go, I don't know if I need to see this in a playoff series. After the last 2 starts, you kind of go, I think I do want to see this in a playoff series. So there's so much volatility with this. Like, I don't know where Ranger Suarez is going to be in 5 weeks. I don't know where Jesus Luzardo is going to be in 5 weeks. I think I know where Christopher Sanchez is going to be, but we're really in the second year of him being this dominant starter. It's not outside the realm of possibility that he has a hiccup or 2 or 3 down the stretch where we start to look at this and go, this is wide open now. And I don't know what we're going to get out of Aaron Nola. I mean, it's pretty compelling stuff, and it's probably going to dictate their ability to navigate the early series of this potential run.
It's why this year the bye is more critical than ever. In the past, I've said there and said, look, I've looked at it a couple years back, and even 22, going back to 22, said they're better off being in the wild card. Like the path was better for them, right? And it worked in 22. It should have worked in 23. Last year, it didn't work to win the bye because you ended up playing the hottest team in baseball in the Mets at that point. This year, it's unquestionable in my mind. The bye is massively important to the Phillies.